My family used me for money, then tried to steal from Grandpa. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now, let's get started. I'm 17 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been nothing more than a shadow in my own home. Not in a cool, mysterious way, just invisible. A background character in the house I was supposed to call home. My parents had their favorite, my older sister, Emma, who's 19. Straight A student, future lawyer, the golden child. Everything she wanted, she got. A brand new iPhone every year, designer clothes, and, for her 18th birthday, a brand new Jeep wrapped up with a giant bow, parked right in the driveway like something out of a movie. Me? If I wanted anything at all, I had to work for it. I've been busting my ass at jobs since I was 15. First stocking shelves at the grocery store, then making sandwiches at a deli. Not because I wanted extra spending money, but because if I didn't buy my own stuff, I'd still be wearing the same worn-out jeans from middle school. And I'm not even exaggerating. When I hit my growth spurt, my parents just shrugged and told me to figure it out. Meanwhile, Emma got a whole new wardrobe anytime she outgrew or got bored of her clothes. It wasn't just about money, though. If she had a bad day, the whole house had to tiptoe around her feelings. My mom would drop everything to comfort her, making homemade soup and buying special tissues if she so much as sneezed. But if I came home looking like hell after pulling a double shift, the only thing my mom would say was, "Did you remember to pick up the milk?" I wasn't part of the family. I was just there. Dinners were the worst. Every night, it was the same script. "Mom, Emma, tell us about your day." And she'd go on forever. Some drama with her friends, a hard test, whatever. Meanwhile, I sat there in silence. On rare occasions, someone would remember I existed and toss "how was your day?" my way. But by then, they were already clearing the table or checking their phones. The final straw? The car. Emma's Jeep wasn't just a gift. It was a whole event. My dad gave this big speech in the driveway about how proud they were of her, how she deserved it. Flash forward to my 18th birthday, and guess what I got? A grocery store cake and a $50 bill. Oh, and some classic words of wisdom from Dad. If you want a car, start saving up. I was done. I started working more shifts, not just for the money, but to be anywhere but home. My manager at the deli, who paid me minimum wage, cared more about my future than my own parents did. That's when it really sank in. My parents weren't abusive. They didn't scream at me or hit me. They just didn't care. And honestly, that might have been worse. Because if they had been cruel, at least I could be angry. Instead, I was just nothing. For 17 years, I existed in my sister's shadow, waiting for the day when maybe, just maybe, I'd matter to someone. But that day never came. Instead, I realized something. If I ever wanted a real life, I'd have to go out and make one for myself. They expected me to pay rent in my own house. By the time senior year rolled around, I wasn't expecting miracles from my parents. I already knew I wasn't their priority. But I still had hope, just a tiny bit, that they'd help me out with college the way they were helping Emma. I wasn't trying to go to some Ivy League school or anything crazy. Just a decent state college about an hour away. Affordable tuition. Solid programs. Nothing too fancy. One night at dinner, I decided to test the waters. So, I've been looking at state for next fall. The application fee is only like $50. The second the words left my mouth, my parents exchanged this look. One of those silent, telepathic conversations parents have. You could practically hear them deciding how to shut me down. Then my dad cleared his throat and delivered the gut punch. Your sister's education is an investment. If you want college, you'll need to work more hours and take out loans. Time to figure it out on your own. I just sat there, staring at them. We just can't afford to send both of you, my mom added. Nodding like this was the most logical thing in the world. Emma's program is very expensive. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Dad put down his fork and hit me with a real bombshell. Actually, now that you're almost 18, we think it's time you started contributing to the household. Rent and utilities. You know, to prepare you for the real world. I almost choked on my food. You want me to pay rent? In my own house. It's our house, Mom corrected. and money is tight right now. Oh, now money was tight? It sure didn't seem tight when Emma wanted to go to Boston for the weekend to tour law firms, aka party with her friends, or when she needed a brand new laptop for school, which they bought without a second thought. No, money was only tight when it came to me. That night, I sat in my room doing the math. Rent in our area was insane. I couldn't afford my own place on deli wages. Maybe I could get roommates, but who? All my friends were heading off to college with their parents' support. I had no one. The next morning, I barely got 2 bites into my cereal before my mom reminded me. Don't forget, we need last month's internet bill by Friday. Like I was some tenant they were chasing down for late payments. And then Emma walked in, half asleep, grabbed her special organic smoothie from the fridge, because of course she had special food just for her, and nobody said a word about her paying for anything. She hadn't worked a single day in her life. But somehow, I was the financial burden. I couldn't help myself. Why isn't she paying anything? Mom blinked at me like I was speaking another language. She's focused on her studies, she said in that condescending tone she used when I was being ridiculous. You should be grateful you even have a roof over your head. Grateful? For being treated like a tenant in my own house. For working 30 hours a week just to afford the basics while Emma got everything handed to her. Yeah, super grateful over here. They took my money without a second thought. A few nights later, I found my dad in his office, staring at a bill with a deep frown. He let out this big sigh, rubbed his forehead, and then turned to me like I was his personal ATM. You know, kiddo, every little bit helps. I wanted to say, every little bit is already gone toward Emma's fancy life. But I bit my tongue. That's how things worked in our house. Keep your head down, don't make waves, accept that you're less important. Then my mom started leaving reminders on the fridge. Rent due Friday. Smiling face. Like she wasn't shaking down her own kid. Meanwhile, Emma's notes said stuff like, good luck on your presentation, sweetie. Right next to a Visa gift card or a Starbucks voucher. I needed a way out. The deli couldn't give me more hours, so I started looking for another job. I found one, a night security gig at an office building. Boring as hell, just standing around, checking doors. But it paid better. And honestly, being alone in an empty building felt better than being invisible at home. Between the 2 jobs, I was working nearly 50 hours a week while trying to finish high school. I was exhausted all the time. My grades started slipping. Did my parents notice? Nope. But when Emma got a B+ once, my mom immediately made her favorite dinner to cheer her up after such a devastating disappointment. The first time I handed over rent money was the worst. I had just cashed my check, counted out the bills, stuffed them into an envelope. After dinner, I slid it across the table to my dad. He took it without even looking up. No thank you, no appreciation, nothing. Just a nod before shoving it into his wallet, like it was completely normal for a parent to take rent money from their own kid while their other child lived like royalty. That was the moment it really hit me. This wasn't my home anymore. I was just a tenant. And if I couldn't pay, they'd kick me out. I started keeping my stuff packed, just in case. I was just a paycheck to them. One night, after a brutal double shift, I got home at around 2 a.m. The house was dark, silent. Everyone else was asleep, living their perfect, stress-free lives. I grabbed some cold leftovers from the fridge and sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the place I'd grown up in. The family pictures on the walls? I was barely in them. The expensive decorations? The designer furniture? The little luxuries my parents claimed they couldn't afford when it came to me? All there. And right in front of me, stuck to the fridge, was a bright pink note. Utilities due Friday. Smiling face. Like it was some friendly reminder, not my own mother demanding money from her kid. And that's when it hit me. Is this it? Is this really my life? Working my ass off just to stay in a house where no one gave a damn about me? Watching my sister live the life I'd never have? It made me sick. There had to be something better than this. Anything had to be better than this. The only person who ever treated me like I mattered. Through all of this, there was only one person who ever made me feel like I wasn't just taking up space. My grandpa. He lived a few states away on a horse ranch. Not some fancy Montana spread. Just a quiet, hard-working place with a handful of stables, fenced pastures, and about a dozen horses. I didn't get to visit much. My parents always had more important things to do. But when I did, It felt like stepping into another world. No reminders that I was less than. No expectations to hand over my paycheck. Just open land, fresh air, and actual peace. The ranch wasn't much to look at. Needed a fresh coat of paint. The fences were always in need of fixing, but I didn't care. Because out there, for the first time in my life, I felt useful. Grandpa had me help groom the horses, clean their hooves, brush them down. Hard work that left me sore and smelling like horse, but I didn't mind. Because unlike my parents, he actually treated me like I was capable. He didn't give me speeches about how special I was. He didn't shower me with praise. But when he asked my opinion on something, he listened. When I messed up, he showed me the right way and let me try again. Just basic human respect. And compared to home, it felt revolutionary. Maybe I didn't need my parents at all. The ideas started growing in my head, slow at first, then impossible to ignore. What if I just left? Cut ties. Focused on my own future instead of paying for my sister's. Stay and be nothing, or leave and try to be something. I started researching GED programs, figuring out if I could test out of high school early. I checked bus ticket prices, looking at how much it would take to get to Grandpa's place. Just planning, just dreaming. But then I started noticing weird things happening at home. My parents were getting all these official-looking envelopes in the mail. Legal documents, the kind with law firm names printed on the front. Every time I walked into the room, they'd quickly hide them. They started having these hushed conversations that stopped the second I got near. At first, I thought maybe they were getting a divorce. That would have explained the secrecy. But they weren't fighting any more than usual. And they were still perfectly united when it came to making me feel like a second-class citizen. So what the hell was going on? I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. One stormy night, my security shift ended early because of a power outage. I got home at around 1 a.m., way earlier than usual. I stepped inside quietly, expecting everyone to be asleep. But then, from the kitchen, I heard my parents talking in low voices. I froze. "He'll never know," my dad was saying. His eyesight's so bad these days, he can barely read the newspaper without a magnifying glass. My mom sounded nervous. But what if he asked someone else to look at it? Who? He lives alone in the middle of nowhere. By the time anyone figures it out, it'll be too late. The deal will be done. I held my breath. Who are they talking about? Then my dad continued. "Look, the developer needs an answer by the end of the month. This is how we guarantee Emma's future. Her tuition's not going to pay itself, and this deal sets her up for life. We owe it to her after everything we've sacrificed." Mom sighed. "I just don't want any trouble. Your father worked hard for that land, and now it can work for us," my dad said firmly. "All we need is his signature on these papers." And that's when I realized they weren't talking about just anyone. They were talking about Grandpa, and they were planning something shady as hell. They were trying to steal his ranch. Over the next few weeks, I started watching them closer. The legal documents kept arriving in the mail, big, thick envelopes that they'd stash away as soon as I walked in. My parents started taking unexplained day trips, whispering in the living room late at night. And Emma, who had never once cared about Grandpa, suddenly started asking about him. "How's Grandpa's health these days?" she'd say, all fake concern. "Is he still managing the ranch okay?" Something was definitely up. I started snooping. Yeah, I know, going through someone's stuff is wrong. But something felt seriously off. I checked the mail before they got home, looking for clues. I listened to doors like I was in some spy movie. Then one day, while they were out at one of Emma's debate tournaments, I went in my dad's office. And that's where I found them, hidden in his desk drawer, beneath a pile of old receipts, legal documents, property transfers, power of attorney forms, a new will for Grandpa, all dated recently. And the worst part? They already had his signature on some of them. But something was off. I'd seen Grandpa's handwriting before. On birthday cards, notes, Christmas letters. This wasn't his. Not quite. It was close, but not right. Because it was forged. My parents weren't just manipulating Grandpa. They were stealing from him. Real, criminal-level fraud. And I was the only one who could stop them. I had proof, but would anyone believe me? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. I had all the proof I needed, photos of the documents, Grandpa's forged signature, even notes about some developer who was buying up land in his area. But what the hell was I supposed to do with it? Would Grandpa even believe me over his own son? Would he even understand what was happening? He was in his 70s, living alone on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. What if my dad just sweet-talked him into signing whatever they put in front of him? I needed to be smart. I couldn't just confront my parents. If they suspected I knew, they'd destroy the evidence and rush their plan before I had a chance to stop them. So instead, I played dumb. I acted normal. And while I did that, I started planting little seeds of doubt. Testing the waters. At dinner, I started casually bringing up Grandpa. Wonder how Grandpa's doing these days? Haven't seen him in a while. Every time, my parents would exchange a weird look before changing the subject. I started noticing even more shady things, like my dad practicing Grandpa's signature on scrap paper. I caught him once, scribbling it over and over like some psycho forging a hall pass in middle school. The second he saw me, he crumpled the paper and forced a laugh. Just doodling. Yeah, because normal people just casually practice other people's signatures for fun. The more I watched, the more obvious it became. They were planning something big. And then they hit me with a bombshell. We were all going to visit Grandpa. A family trip, which was weird. They never wanted to visit him before. Now, all of a sudden, they were insisting we all go, including Emma, who normally hated the ranch and whined about the smell. This was it. They were going to try to get Grandpa to sign those papers in person. And I was the only one who could stop them. The calm before the storm. The days leading up to the trip were nerve-wracking as hell. I had to pretend like nothing was wrong, even though I knew my parents were about to commit full-blown fraud right in front of me. Every time they whispered in the other room, I wondered, are they talking about me? Do they suspect I know? One night, I overheard him on the phone with Mom. So I just need to distract him while you guys do the paperwork thing. Dad says if this goes through, law school is covered for the next 2 years, plus maybe a down payment for my apartment. Wow, they really thought they were about to pull this off. The night before we left, my parents had another late-night discussion in their room. What if he wants to read the papers himself? Mom whispered. We've been over this, Dad said, annoyed. I'll tell him it's just routine estate planning. Too complicated to bother with details. He trusts me. That was when it really sank in. They weren't just trying to steal from Grandpa. They were using his trust against him. His own son was planning to scam him out of his life's work. I had to find a way to stop them. Arriving at the ranch. The morning of the trip, my parents were in full fake happy family mode. Mom packed Grandpa's favorite cookies, like that somehow balanced out them trying to steal his ranch. Dad kept talking about a great investment opportunity they were considering. Emma, as usual, was worried about the important things in life. Does Grandpa even have decent cell service? I spent the whole car ride staring out the window, trying to figure out my next move. I had the evidence, but if I confronted them too soon, they'd lie, twist the story, maybe even convince Grandpa that I was the problem. I needed the perfect moment. We pulled up to the ranch, and there was Grandpa, waiting on the porch. He looked genuinely happy to see us, which made everything worse. He had no idea what was coming. The perfect family act. The second we got out of the car, my parents started laying it on thick. The place looks great, Dad. My father beamed, glancing around. But I could see it now. He wasn't looking at the ranch. He was looking at money. Emma even put on boots and pretended to be interested in learning about ranch life. It was so fake, I almost gagged. Grandpa seemed a little confused by the sudden interest, but was happy to have company. That night, after dinner, my parents set the mood perfectly. Warm lighting, soft conversation, everyone relaxed. Emma conveniently pulled Grandpa aside, showing him pictures on her phone, probably some college event, fake happy selfies with friends. The distraction had begun, and that's when I saw my dad reach for his briefcase. This was it, stopping the scam. I had to act fast. Actually, I said suddenly, standing up, Grandpa, can I show you something with the horses? I think the bay mare is favoring her left front leg. Everyone froze. That wasn't in the script. Mom's smile wavered. Right now, she asked, her tone a little too sharp. Yeah, better check it before it gets dark, I said, keeping my voice casual. Grandpa studied me for a second, then nodded. Good eye, kid. Let's take a look. As we walked to the stables, I could feel my parents' eyes burning into my back. They were pissed, but they couldn't say anything without seeming suspicious. Once we were alone, Grandpa turned to me. "There's nothing wrong with the bay mare, is there?" I took a deep breath. "No." He raised an eyebrow. "So what's going on, kid? You've been jumpy since you got here." This was it. "Grandpa, Mom, and Dad are trying to scam you." His expression didn't change much. "That's a serious accusation." "I know," I said, pulling out my phone. "But I have proof." I showed him the photos of the documents, the property transfers, the forged signatures. His face darkened as he scrolled. "Why would they do this now?" he muttered. "They've never cared about the ranch before." "Because of the developer," I explained. "The land is worth millions now. They don't care about the ranch, or the horses, or you. They just want the money." He was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, he looked up at me. "You know," he said, "I always wondered how you turned out so different from them." I blinked. "What?" "Decent. Honest." He handed my phone back. "You could have gone along with it. Probably would have gotten something out of the deal." I shook my head. "That's not who I am." He nodded. "No, it's not." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Let's go back inside." "Wait, what are you going to do?" "Nothing tonight," he said. "Tonight we act normal. Tomorrow, we deal with this." And that's exactly what we did. The trap was set. That night, we went back inside like nothing had happened. The legal documents were already spread out on the dining table, my dad's pen placed neatly beside them. Grandpa sat down, rubbing his eyes like he was tired. "We should go over these estate planning documents," my dad said, trying to sound casual. "Just some routine stuff my lawyer recommended. Nothing complicated." Grandpa yawned. "Too tired for paperwork tonight. These old eyes need rest." The look on my parents' faces was priceless. Frustration. Panic. They had come all this way, set up their scam so perfectly, and now their victim just wanted to sleep. They had no choice but to nod and agree. But what they didn't know was that Grandpa wasn't just tired. He was buying time. Because tomorrow, the real show was going to begin. The moment everything fell apart. The next morning, I found Grandpa in the kitchen, drinking his usual black coffee. He didn't say good morning. Instead, he looked up at me and said, "I made some calls last night." My stomach flipped. "Who did you call?" "My lawyer. And my brother. They'll be here around 10. Figure we might need some witnesses." Holy, this was actually happening. "What about Mom and Dad?" I asked. "What about them?" Grandpa said, taking another sip of coffee. "Let them think everything is still going according to their plan." "And Emma?" I asked. A flicker of disappointment crossed his face. "She made her choice, too. They thought they had one." When my parents finally came downstairs, they looked annoyingly well-rested for two people about to commit fraud. Mom was cheerful, making a big breakfast, talking about how peaceful she slept in the country air. Dad kept glancing at his watch, clearly eager to finally get those papers signed. Grandpa played along perfectly. He asked Emma about school, chatted about the horses, acted like everything was fine. I, on the other hand, could barely eat my eggs, because I knew what was coming. And when my dad finally stood up and grabbed his briefcase, I almost wanted to laugh. "Maybe we should all sit in the living room," my mom suggested, still putting on her sweet, innocent act. "More comfortable for going through those papers." "Good idea," Grandpa said, nodding. So we all moved to the living room. Dad laid out the documents on the coffee table, his face full of fake concern. "Now, Dad," he began, slipping right into his rehearsed speech, "these are just standard estate planning documents. Nothing complicated. Just making sure everything's properly arranged for the future." Grandpa picked up the first document, squinting at it like he could barely read. "What's this part about property transfer?" Dad launched into his carefully crafted explanation, throwing out a bunch of legal jargon that sounded important but meant absolutely nothing. And then, just as my dad was finishing his little performance, we all heard it. The sound of multiple cars pulling into the driveway. My parents froze. They had not planned for this. "Game over. You expecting company?" my dad asked, his voice suddenly tight. Grandpa stood up and walked to the window. "Might be," he said casually. "Let's see. Ah, yes. My lawyer. And your uncle, Steve." My mom actually went pale. "Your lawyer?" she whispered. Why would you need your lawyer? Well, Grandpa said, turning back to them, when someone tries to steal my ranch through forged documents, seems like a good time to have legal counsel present. Boom. No build-up. No drama. Just straight-up exposure. The room went dead silent. I swear you could have heard a mouse fart. The great family meltdown. My dad's face did this weird thing, like he was stuck between pretending to be outraged and realizing he had just been caught red-handed. I don't know what you're talking about, he sputtered. Steal your ranch? Dad, come on, these are just estate planning documents. Uncle Steve snorted. Cut the crap, David. We've seen the papers. We know about the developer offering millions for this land. You think your dad's some senile, old fool you can trick into signing his life away. Mom jumped in, her voice going all high-pitched. This is ridiculous. We were just trying to help organize things for Dad's future. Why are you attacking us like this? Grandpa's lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps you'd like to explain why these so-called estate planning documents transfer full ownership of the ranch to you and your wife, with no compensation to Mr. Mitchell, or why they grant you power of attorney, effective immediately, or why there are practice signatures in your handwriting attempting to mimic your father's signature. My dad turned white. Where did you get that? He hissed, his voice suddenly venomous. Then he looked at me, and I saw the exact moment he put it all together. You, he whispered, his face contorting with rage. I held my ground, even though my heart was pounding. Yeah, I said. Me. My sister finally caught on. Emma, who had been sitting quietly this whole time, finally snapped out of her daze. Wait, what? Dad, what's he talking about? She asked, looking between all of us. Were we really here to get Grandpa to sign over the ranch? Oh, so she really hadn't known the full details. She had just been a willing distraction, never questioning what she was actually helping with. Not sure if that made her better or worse. But either way, Grandpa wasn't having it. All of you, he said coldly. Get out. They were dead to me. My mom's face crumpled. Please, Dad, she sniffled, switching to full victim mode. We were just trying to do what's best for the family. No, Grandpa interrupted. You were doing what's best for yourselves. Now leave, before I have my lawyer press charges. Dad's hands clenched into fists. You're making a mistake, he spat. Grandpa raised an eyebrow. Funny, he said. I was just about to say the same thing to you. And that's when my dad turned back to me. I suppose you think you're so clever, he hissed. I didn't flinch. Not clever, I said. Just not a liar and a thief. His face twisted in rage. You're not my son anymore, he growled. I don't ever want to see your face again. The words hit harder than I expected. But I didn't break. I just stared him down and said, Good, because I'm done trying to be. And that was the last thing I ever said to him. The ranch became my home. Just like that, they were gone. For the first time in my life, I belonged somewhere. Grandpa let me stay at the ranch. Over the next few years, he taught me everything. How to run the business, manage the land, care for the horses. Now, I own it. The business is thriving. We have employees, therapy programs, even small rodeos. And my parents? They tried showing up last Christmas, probably hoping to guilt trip their way back in. Uncle Steve met them at the gate and said, Get lost, or I'll call the sheriff. Most satisfying moment ever. My parents spent years making me feel like nothing. But in the end, I was the only one who stood up and stopped them. And that's worth more than any inheritance. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.